A special grand jury report on former President Trump's election meddling in Georgia will stay secret for now.
The report details whether Trump or his allies could face charges. National correspondent Mara Siriani is here with the details for us this morning. Hey, Mara, good morning.
Hey, Alex and Lindsay, good morning. So the release of the grand jury document surrounding the investigation of former President Trump's alleged meddling in the 2020 election is on hold for now. Fulton County DA Fani Willis telling Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney that prosecutorial decisions about multiple defendants are, quote, imminent. And she said she wants to keep the grand jury's findings private, adding it would be a disservice to the 75 witnesses that came forward to testify here. So some of those high-profile witnesses include Trump's former personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, Georgia's top elections official, Brad Raffensperger, and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Now, Judge McBurney, who oversaw the grand jury, ruled to keep the grand jury report sealed for now. He did say he hasn't made a final decision on whether to ultimately release it. Attorneys for Trump did not participate in Tuesday's hearing. Media attorney Tom Klein is urging the immediate release of the grand jury's report, noting now that their work is complete, the time for secrecy has passed.
We believe the report should be released now and in its entirety, and that approach is consistent with the way the American judicial system operates. The faith of the public in the court system is much improved by operating in a public way. The jurors themselves have asked for it to be published. There's enormous public interest in what they have said.
Another Fulton County prosecutor said it would be, quote, dangerous to release the grand jury report before any charging decisions are made here. Unlike other grand juries, the one impaneled for this case did not have the power to issue indictments. That decision is going to be left up to DA Fani Willis. Alex.
All right, Mara, thank you.
All right, now to give us, with the Fulton County DA saying decisions are imminent in the case, we wanted to try and see where the case will turn next. So now we're joined by Pete Skandalakis, Executive Director of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia, an overarching agency that provides training, development, and continued legal education for district attorneys right here in the Peach State. He's also a former DA for the Coweta Judicial Circuit Court. Pete, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Morning Rush. Let's get right into it. When you hear imminent, the word imminent for possible indictments, as a prosecutor, what does that timetable mean? Is it really vague, or does it give you a good idea?
Well, that's a good question. And first of all, thank you for having me on this morning. I don't know what that really means, because you have things you have to do. You have to review the report. You have to review the documents. You have to take a close look at what cases you do have, if you have a case. And then you have to make sure that you can prove any charge beyond a reasonable doubt. It's one thing to make an allegation. It's another thing to prove a case. So I think District Attorney Willis is looking everything over, and she'll make a decision based upon where the evidence will lead her.
And what factors is she going to be looking at?
Well, again, she's looking at the elements of the crime, which in Georgia are set out in the code. And she's looking to see, does she have sufficient evidence, sufficient testimony, sufficient documents that can prove her case beyond a reasonable doubt. As you well know, this was an investigative grand jury, and an investigative grand jury helps you kind of determine what evidence is available to you at trial. Not only what evidence is available to you, but what evidence is credible and what evidence is not credible. So District Attorney Willis has been very thorough in this investigation, and I assume what she's doing right now is reviewing all the documents she has, all the records, and all the witness testimony.
And while certainly investigating a former president is not necessarily a common case for the Fulton County District Attorney, is there any prior cases that have set a precedent for how to deal with this sort of grand jury and potential indictments?
Well, I will tell you that a special grand jury is a rarity in Georgia. We don't use them a lot. We seldom use them. And I think that's why Judge McBurney is being very cautious and very careful how he wants to release this report. We know a special grand jury in Georgia does not have the power to file charges or to indict. And therefore, what is in this report, Georgia case law says you can't make disparaging remarks or you can't infer criminal conduct upon a person in your report, because obviously that person doesn't have a chance to refute it. So Judge McBurney is being very careful about what, if anything, will be released in this report.
So let's say you were an attorney representing one of the people who testified. What would you take away from yesterday's actions by the DA and the judge? What would be your strategy moving forward?
Well, that's a great question because I don't know. I don't know what's in the report.
Right.
I don't know what witnesses have testified to. I don't know what records were subpoenaed, what records are available. And so at this point, I would be advising my clients that we have to take a wait and see attitude. I would trust Judge McBurney with being the gatekeeper here, that he doesn't release parts of that report that would infer criminal conduct where I don't have a chance to refute it. So, you know, that's a great question. And I would just have to say, let's wait and see.
And speaking of waiting and seeing, there are several investigations happening right now regarding former President Trump. Specifically, there are investigations with the Department of Justice. Is there any ties between these cases that might impact one or the other?
Well, I think there's been a lot of comments and accurate comments that say, you know, a lot of the same evidence that the January 6th committee heard is probably some of the same evidence that this special grand jury heard. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different because the January 6th committee was looking at what happened at the United States Capitol, and this grand jury was looking at exactly what happened in the state of Georgia. But typically, you don't have. Sometimes you'll have sharing of information, but a lot of times the Department of Justice is working its own investigation and state prosecutors are working their own investigations.
All right, Pete Skandalakis, Executive Director of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia. Thank you so much for your time and breaking that down for us. We appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being able to speak about it.
Absolutely.